He relied on his brother's wealth as retirement, but life taught him the hard way. 0130 hook. For 35 years, Daniel believed he'd never need to save a dime. His older brother had promised him a future he'd never have to worry about. Every family gathering, every holiday dinner, Michael would raise his glass and say the same thing. When I'm gone, Danny will be set for life. Daniel believed it. Why wouldn't he? Michael was his hero, his protector, the brother who always came through. But on one cold October morning, Daniel pulled into the driveway of his brother's mansion and found something he never expected. Police tape stretched across the front door. Forensic vans lined the street. Federal agents carried boxes of documents out of the house like they were dismantling a crime scene. Because they were. Within hours, Daniel would learn a secret that didn't just ruin his retirement, it put him at the center of a federal investigation. How does a man go from expecting millions to losing everything, including his freedom? This is that story. 133. T's key questions. What happened to Michael on the morning everything collapsed? Why was Daniel suddenly a suspect in his own brother's financial downfall? And how did a lifetime of trust turn into the betrayal that shocked everyone who knew them? This is a story about trust, money, and the dangers of relying on a promise that was never real. And the twist, it's darker than anyone expected. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. 3:10. Backstory. Daniel and Michael grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knew your name and your business. They were only 3 years apart, but the difference between them was clear from the start. Michael was the golden child, charismatic, driven, always 3 steps ahead. Daniel was steady, loyal, the kind of guy who showed up on time and did what he said he'd do. Their father worked at the steel mill for 40 years before a heart attack took him at 53. Their mother cleaned houses until arthritis made it impossible. The boys learned early that life was hard, but family was everything. Michael left town at 22 and never looked back. He moved to Chicago, started flipping houses, and by his 30s, he owned a chain of upscale restaurants and a real estate portfolio that made him a millionaire several times over. Daniel stayed close to home. He worked construction, married his high school sweetheart, and raised 2 kids in the same neighborhood where he grew up. He was proud of his brother, never jealous, just proud. Every Thanksgiving, Michael would fly the whole family out to his estate in the suburbs. The house had 6 bedrooms, a pool, and a wine cellar that cost more than Daniel's annual salary. Michael loved to show it off, not in a bragging way, but like he wanted everyone to see what was possible. And every year, without fail, he'd pull Daniel aside and say, "You don't need to worry about retirement, Danny. I've got you covered. When I'm gone, you'll have more than you know what to do with." Daniel would laugh it off at first, but after a while, he started to believe it. Why wouldn't he? Michael had never lied to him before. So Daniel stopped contributing to his 401k. He cashed out his small pension when he switched jobs. He figured, why bother? Michael had millions, and Michael always kept his word. But in the last 2 years, something changed. Michael's phone calls became shorter, more distracted. He missed family gatherings. When Daniel visited, he noticed Michael pacing in his study late at night, talking in hushed tones on the phone. Once, Daniel walked in on him, shredding documents, stacks of them, and when Michael saw him, he snapped, "Don't you knock?" It wasn't like him. Daniel brushed it off. Stress, he thought. Business pressure. But deep down, something felt wrong. 10:20 The incident. It was a Tuesday morning in October when Daniel got the call. Or rather, when he didn't. He'd been trying to reach Michael for 3 days. No answer, no text back, nothing. Daniel told his wife he was going to check on him. She said, "Maybe he's just busy." But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling. He drove the 2 hours to Michael's house, rehearsing what he'd say when his brother opened the door and laughed at him for worrying. But when he turned onto the street, his stomach dropped. Police cars, unmarked sedans, officers standing at the front door. Daniel parked across the street and sat there for a moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel. He didn't understand what he was seeing. Then an agent noticed him, walked over, and tapped on his window. "You know the owner of this property?" Daniel nodded. "That's my brother." "What's going on?" The agent's face was unreadable. "We need to ask you some questions." They took him to the house. Inside, it looked like a hurricane had torn through. Drawers pulled open, papers scattered, computers being loaded into evidence bags. Daniel kept asking where Michael was, but no one would answer. Finally, a lead investigator sat him down in the dining room, the same room where they'd shared Thanksgiving dinner just 10 months ago. "When was the last time you spoke to your brother?" the investigator asked. Daniel told him, 3 days ago. A short call. Michael had sounded rushed. "Did he mention traveling? Leaving the country?" Daniel shook his head. "Leaving? No. Why would he?" The investigator leaned back. "Because, as of 72 hours ago, your brother is a fugitive. We have reason to believe he's involved in financial fraud, money laundering, and possibly wire fraud. And right now, Mr. Daniel, you're a person of interest." Daniel felt the room tilt. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. The investigator continued. "We've frozen all accounts associated with your brother's businesses. That includes several accounts with your name on them." Daniel's heart stopped. "My name?" The investigator slid a folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, investment portfolios, offshore accounts, all with Daniel's social security number attached. Daniel stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "I don't know anything about this," he said. "I've never seen these accounts." The investigator's expression didn't change. "Then you need to help us understand why your brother used your identity to open them." Daniel drove home in a daze. By the time he pulled into his driveway, his bank had called. His checking account was frozen. His credit cards were declined. He walked inside and told his wife everything. She cried. He didn't. He couldn't. He just sat there, staring at the wall, trying to understand how his entire life had been dismantled in a single morning. The man he trusted most in the world had betrayed him. And the worst part? Daniel had $47 in cash to his name. 2035 to 0 aftermath and investigation. The next morning, the story broke. Local news picked it up first, then the national outlets. Millionaire businessman vanishes amid fraud investigation. Michael's face was everywhere, and so was Daniel's. Reporters camped outside his house. Neighbors stopped making eye contact. His kids were bullied at school. One night, someone spray-painted "thief" across his garage door. Daniel couldn't leave the house without being followed. The FBI wanted to talk to him every other day. They were polite at first, then aggressive. They didn't believe he knew nothing. How could he not know? They were brothers. They were close. Daniel told them the truth over and over. He didn't know about the accounts. He didn't know about the fraud. He trusted Michael. That was his only crime. But trust isn't a defense, and ignorance doesn't hold up in court. 3 weeks after Michael disappeared, agents found a letter in his study. It was handwritten, addressed to no one, but it mentioned Daniel by name. He never deserved this. I tried to protect him, but I couldn't. If you're reading this, tell him I'm sorry. The letter was vague, cryptic, but it changed everything. Suddenly, the investigation shifted. Was Daniel a victim, or was he complicit? The media ran with it. Some outlets painted him as the innocent brother caught in a nightmare. Others suggested he knew more than he was saying, that he'd been living off Michael's money for years. The truth didn't matter anymore. Public opinion had already decided. Daniel stopped sleeping. He lost 20 pounds. His wife begged him to hire a lawyer, but he couldn't afford one. Everything they had was frozen or seized. He was living in a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. Then, 5 weeks after Michael vanished, there was a breakthrough. A highway patrol officer in Montana found Michael's SUV abandoned on the side of a rural highway. The doors were unlocked. The keys were still in the ignition. Inside, agents found a burner phone, a duffel bag with $15,000 in cash, and a USB drive. They brought it back to the lab, and what they found on that drive would rewrite everything. 35-0, 45-0, the twist. The USB drive contained audio recordings, hours of them. Michael's voice, recorded over several months, confessing to fraud, to embezzlement, to laundering money through shell companies. But he wasn't just confessing. He was explaining. He claimed he'd been threatened, that someone had forced him into it, that he was scared for his life. In one recording, Michael's voice cracked. "I never wanted to drag Danny into this. But they told me if I didn't use his name, they'd go after him. I thought I was protecting him. I thought I could fix it before anyone found out." Daniel listened to the recordings in a federal office, flanked by agents and his court-appointed attorney. He sat there, motionless, as his brother's voice filled the room. When it ended, Daniel looked at the lead investigator and said, "So, I was a pawn." The investigator nodded. "It looks that way." But the story didn't end there. Forensic accountants traced the money. Millions had moved through the accounts under Daniel's name, but none of it stayed. It was cleaned, moved offshore, and funneled into accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. Michael had been running a sophisticated operation for years, and Daniel had been his cover. The recordings made Daniel look innocent, but they also tied him legally to every transaction. His name was on the paperwork. His identity had been stolen, but proving it was another battle. And then, just when Daniel thought it couldn't get worse, one agent said something that stopped him cold. "Someone accessed these accounts after your brother disappeared." Daniel looked up. "What do you mean?" The agent pulled up a report. 3 of the offshore accounts were accessed from an IP address in Mexico, 2 days after your brother went missing. Daniel's breath caught. "Meaning what?" The agent met his eyes. "Meaning your brother might still be alive." 45-0, 55-0, final twist and resolution. The FBI tracked Michael for months. Grainy security footage from an airport in Tijuana showed a man matching his description boarding a flight to Costa Rica. But he wasn't alone. The woman with him was familiar, too familiar. Daniel saw the footage and felt his stomach turn. It was Lauren, Michael's girlfriend of 8 years, the woman who'd sat at their family dinners, who'd hugged Daniel's wife and played with his kids. She'd been in on it the whole time. They'd planned it together. Michael and Lauren had orchestrated everything: the fraud, the disappearance, the setup. They'd used Daniel's identity to create a financial cushion, then vanished with the money, leaving him to take the fall. It was calculated. It was cold. And it worked. Daniel was eventually cleared of criminal charges. The recordings and forensic evidence proved he had no knowledge of the fraud. But clearing his name didn't give him his life back. His credit was destroyed. His savings were gone. His reputation was in ruins. He was 57 years old, with no retirement, no assets, and no way to start over. His wife stood by him. But the weight of it all broke something between them. They separated 6 months later. Not because she stopped loving him, but because neither of them could carry the weight anymore. Daniel moved into a 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. He took a job at a hardware store, stocking shelves, for $12 an hour. At night, he'd sit on his couch and think about Michael, about the brother he thought he knew, about the promise that was never real. 2 years later, Daniel got a call from the FBI. They'd found Michael. He and Lauren had been living in a beachside villa in Panama under fake names. They were arrested and extradited. Michael was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. Lauren got 12. Daniel was asked if he wanted to attend the sentencing. He said no. There was nothing left to say. The brother he loved was gone. The man in that courtroom was a stranger. Daniel never got his money back. He never got an apology. But he learned something that no one else could teach him. Never build your future on someone else's foundation. No matter how much you trust them. No matter how much they promise. Because in the end, the only person you can truly rely on is yourself. 55-0, 60-0 engagement, and close. So let me ask you, if you were Daniel, what would you have done differently? Would you have questioned your brother sooner? Would you have saved your own money, even with his promises? And do you think justice was truly served? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And tell me, how would you feel if someone you trusted with your entire future betrayed you like this? Could you forgive them? Could you move on? This story shook me when I first found it, and I know it's going to stay with you too. If it did, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more real-life stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the next case I'm covering involves a woman who accidentally uncovered her husband's double life, and the ending is absolutely unbelievable. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.